The galaxy had known war before, but nothing like this. Stars dimmed beneath fleets that blotted out entire systems. Worlds once proud and strong became fields of ash. The weaker civilizations had cried out to the great empires, begging for aid. But most powers turned their faces away, unwilling to waste fleets on what they thought was a hopeless fight. On the fractured colony world of Nivora, the sky was red with smoke and the earth trembled under bombardment. The people there were not warriors. They were scholars, traders, and builders. They had never fought in a war, and now they were being torn apart by it. The invaders were merciless, creatures of iron and fire who saw no difference between soldier and child. The people of Nivora sent their desperate signal across the stars. They begged, pleaded, and cried for help. Days turned to weeks. The people waited, huddled in the ruins of their cities. They expected silence, or perhaps a kind word of pity before being abandoned again. Then one night, the stars above shifted. A fleet arrived. It was not what they expected. These ships were smaller, darker, more battered than the shining cruisers of the galactic empires. They carried scars from battles long past, and their hulls bore markings unfamiliar to the Nivan people. At first, many thought another enemy had come. Fear spread among them, for they had nothing left to give, nothing left to defend. But then the transmissions came through. The voice was rough, deep, and human. "This is the fleet of Earth. Deathworlders have heard your call." The words struck them like thunder. Deathworlders. Every child in the galaxy knew the Thales humans. Born from a world so hostile it devoured most life. Raised in storms and fire, molded in struggle. They were whispered about like monsters and heroes alike. Dangerous, reckless, untamed. The galaxy feared them as much as it needed them. And now, for the first time in living memory, they had come. The first human ships descended into the burning cities. Their soldiers walked out in strange armor, dark metal shaped for speed and power, their weapons humming with controlled fury. They were not many compared to the endless armies that ravaged the world, but they moved with purpose. They carried themselves as if death was an old friend. One Nivran girl, hiding in the ruins of a school, peeked out as a tall human passed. His eyes scanned the rubble, sharp and watchful, glowing faintly beneath his visor. He saw her and stopped. For a moment, she thought he would be cold like the other empires, distant and proud. But then he reached down and lifted her gently out of the broken stone. His voice was calm, steady. "You're safe now. Stay close." That was the first time the Nivran saw the truth of the humans. Beneath the fearsome reputation, there was something else. Resolve. They fought not because they were ordered, but because they refused to stand aside while innocents suffered. The first clash came swiftly. The invaders, massive machines that strode like titans, advanced through the burning streets. The Nivrans watched helplessly as the human soldiers charged into the fight. Explosions ripped the air. The machines turned their weapons, expecting to crush these new foes easily. But the humans did not scatter. They moved like a pack of predators, working together with signals too quick to follow. A machine raised its cannon to fire, but a human leapt, landing on its arm and blasting through its plating with a weapon that roared like thunder. Another slid beneath, planting charges that ripped the giant apart from within. The enemy screamed, machines collapsing in fire, and the humans did not stop. From the shadows, the Nivrans whispered. They had begged the galaxy for mercy, for hope, for salvation. None had come. And yet these humans, these feared Deathworlders, had answered. When the battle ended, the streets were filled with smoke and ruin, but the enemy was gone. The humans stood tall among the flames, silent, their armor scarred, but their eyes burning. The Nivrans gathered around them, afraid to speak, afraid to breathe too loudly. Finally, one of their elders stepped forward. His voice trembled as he spoke. "Why? Why would you come? Why risk your lives for us?" The lead human pulled off his helmet. His face was marked by old scars, his jaw set firm. His eyes, though hard, carried something the Nivrans had never seen in the other empire's fierce compassion, because no one else would. The words echoed louder than the thunder of battle. That night, for the first time in weeks, the Nivrans felt hope. They had cried for rescue, and though the galaxy had turned away, humanity had come, and the invaders would soon learn what it meant to face a death worlder. Asterisk. The days after the humans arrived were filled with a strange mix of fear and relief. The Nivrans had never stood so close to Deathworlders before. Stories said they were wild, unpredictable, born from storms and poison seas. The people of Nivora expected them to be cruel or distant, like the empires who had abandoned them. But instead, the humans began to rebuild alongside them. They repaired broken shelters with quick hands, moved rubble with their strange machines, and even shared food that smelled sharp and smoky, but filled empty stomachs. For the first time since the invasion began, children laughed again, though quietly, hiding behind their parents when the towering armored figures walked past. But the humans were not here to bring comfort alone. Their eyes were always on the horizon, their hands always close to their weapons. They knew the enemy was not finished. The first battle had been only a test. Bigger armies would come. One evening, as the sun bled red across the sky, the Nivran elder who had spoken before gathered courage to approach the human commander again. He was a scarred man named Captain Rourke. His face looked as if it had been carved by stone and fire, yet when he looked at the Nivrans, there was no cruelty in his gaze. "Why did you answer our call?" The elder asked again. "We were told humans only fight for themselves, that you care nothing for the galaxy." Rourke gave a small, grim smile. "That's what they want you to believe. The empires fear us. They spread lies. But we know what it's like to be abandoned. Earth was never given anything. We had to claw and fight for every scrap. We don't forget that. When we heard your call, we couldn't ignore it." The elder lowered his head, ashamed. "We prayed for saviors, and monsters came instead." Rourke's eyes hardened. "We're not saviors. And yes, we're monsters, but the kind that tear down the wolves at your door. You called for help. Now you live because of it." His words spread through the camp like fire. Some Nivrans feared them even more, while others clung to the hope they represented. The truth came quickly. Scouts rushed back, their alien voices shaking as they reported. The invaders had regrouped. An entire column of war machines was moving through the canyons toward the capital ruins. They had brought airships, towering crawlers, and endless soldiers of steel. This time, they meant to crush everything in their path. The Nivrans panicked. They had no armies left. They had no weapons strong enough to fight. But the humans did not tremble. Captain Rourke gathered his soldiers, spreading maps across the broken stone of an old council hall. "We can't fight them head-on," one of his lieutenants said. "Too many. We'll get slaughtered." Rourke tapped the map, his scarred finger tracing the canyons. "Then we don't fight them head-on. We use the land. Deathworlders don't charge blindly, we hunt." The humans spread out through the night. They carried strange tools, mines that glowed faintly, charges they buried under rubble, traps woven into the ruins. The Nivrans watched from a distance, their fear mixing with awe. These humans moved like predators preparing for the kill. Before dawn, the enemy came. The ground shook as the crawlers rolled forward, armored beasts that spat fire. Airships hung above like dark birds, their cannons turning the ruins to dust. The Nivrans covered their ears as the sky split open with thunder. But the humans were already waiting. The first crawler rolled into the canyon mouth. There was a sound like the earth itself screaming. The ground beneath it erupted in flame, hurling the giant machine into the air before it collapsed in burning pieces. The invaders roared, sending more forward. That was when the humans struck from the shadows. Small squads darted between rocks and rubble, appearing only long enough to strike before vanishing again. A charge would rip through a walker's leg joints, a sniper's shot piercing glowing eyes, a rocket searing into an airship's belly. The invaders, who had never feared anyone before, stumbled in confusion. One Nivoran boy climbed a rooftop and saw it all. He saw a human soldier sprint straight at a burning walker, leaping onto its back, clinging with bare hands as the machine tried to shake him off. With a single blast, he tore through its core, riding it down as it crashed in flames. The boy gasped, heart pounding. This was no ordinary army. This was a pack of beasts unleashed. By the time the sun rose fully, the canyon was filled with wreckage. Smoke climbed to the heavens. The humans stood bloodied and battered, but alive. Around them lay hundreds of burning enemy machines, their twisted shapes painting a new kind of warning across the land. The Nivorans crept from their hiding places. They stared at the destruction with wide eyes. The elders spoke again, whispering so softly it was almost a prayer. They begged for rescue. And the galaxy gave them nothing. But the humans came. Deathworlders came. The word spread again, carried from mouth to mouth. And far beyond Nivora, across other broken worlds, whispers began to grow. The humans had returned. But the war was far from over. The enemy had only just begun to understand who they were facing. The ruins of the capital still smoked when silence finally fell. Broken machines glowed like dying suns, and the smell of fire clung to every stone. The Nivorans walked carefully among the wreckage, whispering as they passed the humans who stood guard like shadows in armor. The people had never seen warriors fight with such fury and precision. It was as if the humans had been born for this battlefield. Children clung to their mothers, pointing at the scars burned across the enemy crawlers. One boy whispered, "They are not soldiers. They are storms." And in a way, he was right. The Deathworlders fought not like disciplined empires, but like nature itself, violent, unstoppable, and alive. Yet for all their victories, Captain Rourke knew the truth. This was not the end. He stood on the edge of the canyon, visor lifted, watching the horizon. Smoke trails twisted upward where more enemy ships gathered. Their numbers seemed endless. "They'll be back," his lieutenant muttered. "And next time, they'll bring everything." Rourke's jaw tightened. "Then we'll make them bleed until they choke on their own strength." That night, the humans gathered the Nivorans in the broken square. Fires burned in barrels, casting long shadows across frightened faces. Rourke stood before them, his armor scarred, his voice hard but steady. "You've seen what we can do," he said. "But we are few, and they are many. If you want to survive, you cannot only hide behind us. You must learn to fight." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Nivorans were builders, thinkers, and artists. They had never raised weapons in war. Fear filled their eyes. But one young woman stepped forward. Her clothes were torn, her face smeared with soot, but her gaze did not waver. "Teach us," she said. "If we are to die, let us die standing." Others followed her. The old, the young, the broken. They had lost everything already: homes, families, dreams. They had nothing left to protect except each other. And so, they chose to fight. The humans began training them in the ruins. At first, the Nivorans stumbled, their hands shaking as they held rifles too heavy for their arms. They tripped in the dust, dropped equipment, and fired shots wildly into empty sky. Some nearly gave up. But the humans did not laugh or sneer. They taught with patience, with steady hands and firm voices. "You don't need to be strong," one human told a trembling boy as he adjusted his grip. "You just need to be willing." Day after day, the camp echoed with the sound of drills, shouts, and practice fire. The Nivorans grew faster, steadier, braver. They learned to move in teams, to trust one another, to hold their ground when fear told them to run. Slowly, they began to change. But even as training went on, the enemy prepared. Scouts returned with news that chilled the air. The invaders had summoned their true war fleet. Dozens of battleships were gathering, enough to wipe Nivora from existence. Time was short. One evening, as the red sun dipped low, Captain Rourke gathered his soldiers around a flickering holomap. The Nivran leaders stood beside them, nervous but resolute. "They'll strike from orbit," Rourke said, pointing at the glowing symbols. "If their fleet locks in, this planet is finished. We can't let them land more troops. That means we hit them before they hit us." The Nivran elder frowned. "You mean to fight them in space? With what ships? We have nothing left." Rourke's lips curled into a hard smile. "You have ruins. We have engineers. And together we make weapons." The plan was madness. Yet it was the only chance they had. In the following days, the humans and Nivrans worked side by side, dragging wreckage from fallen machines, stripping armor, reforging parts. Old cargo haulers were turned into gunboats, mining rigs became missile platforms, and shattered towers were filled with hidden cannons. It was not a fleet worthy of empires. It was jagged, ugly, and desperate. But it was alive. And in every twisted hull burned the will to fight. The people began to see themselves differently. No longer were they only victims. Under the eyes of the humans, they were becoming warriors of their own world. The children stopped whispering storms and began whispering something else. Deathworlders. On the night before battle, the camp was quiet. Fires burned low. Captain Rourke walked through the ruins, stopping when he saw the young woman who had first stepped forward for training. She was cleaning her rifle, her hands steady now, her eyes sharp. "You're not afraid anymore," Rourke said. She looked up at him, a faint smile on her lips. "I am, but fear is not the same as weakness. You taught us that." Rourke nodded once, pride flickering in his scarred face. "Tomorrow, the galaxy will see what happens when the forgotten learn to fight back." Above them, the stars shifted as enemy ships drew closer, glowing like the eyes of a hungry beast. The next dawn would bring fire and ruin. But this time, the Nivrans would not face it alone. They had cried for rescue, and the Deathworlders had answered. And the war was about to change forever. The sky burned before dawn. Great shadows moved above the clouds as the enemy fleet descended. The ground shook as if the world itself was afraid. The Nivrans stood on the high ridges beside the humans, watching the fire streaks of the incoming ships. This time, it was not just a raid. It was the end of everything. Captain Rourke stood with his soldiers, their armor shining dully in the half-light. His eyes followed the glowing horizon. He had seen too many wars, but this one felt different. This time, humanity was not fighting for its own home. It was fighting for someone else's. "All positions ready?" Rourke asked quietly. "Guns charged. Traps armed. Civilians underground," came the reply. He nodded once. "Then let them come." The Nivrans held their breath as the first enemy ships broke through the clouds. They were massive, dark vessels shaped like blades, their engines roaring like monsters. They opened fire immediately, raining molten light down on the ruins. The ground exploded, towers fell, and the air filled with heat and thunder. But the humans did not run. Rourke raised his arm, and the first counterstrike began. Hidden cannons, forged from the bones of wrecked machines, roared to life. Fire lanced up from the ground, striking the lowest enemy craft. One ship burst into flame, spinning out of control before slamming into the hills. The explosion lit up the valley like a second sunrise. Cheers erupted from the Nivrans. For the first time, they saw that the enemy could bleed, but there were too many. The sky darkened as dozens more ships descended. Drones poured out like a black storm, filling the air. The humans spread out, fighting with calm precision. Their shots were perfect, every movement sharp and practiced. They fought like men and women who had already made peace with death. Beside them, the Nivorans fought too. The young woman Rourke had trained. Her name was Lyra, led a squad through the ruins, moving with surprising confidence. Her heart pounded, but her fear no longer ruled her. She fired bursts into the swarm, shouting orders that the others followed without hesitation. She was no longer a builder. She was a defender of her world. Rourke watched her from a distance, pride mixed with dread. "That one," he said to his lieutenant. "She's got the fire of a Deathworlder." The lieutenant smirked beneath his helmet. "Guess it's catching." Hours passed. The battlefield became chaos. The humans fought from street to street, drawing the enemy into traps. Explosions ripped through alleyways where mines had been buried. Buildings collapsed on advancing machines. Still, more came. The ground was shaking constantly now, the sky black with smoke. Then, the worst happened. The enemy flagship, a monstrous vessel miles wide, appeared through the clouds. It was not coming to fight. It was coming to end the world. Its cannons charged with a red light that turned the air molten. Rourke's heart froze. He knew that weapon. A planetary strike. One blast would wipe out everything within hundreds of miles, including every human and Nivoran alive. He turned to his crew. "We can't let that ship fire. I don't care what it takes. We stop it now." "But Captain," one of them protested, "we have no ship strong enough to reach it." Rourke looked toward the broken fleet of salvaged vessels hidden in the canyons. "Then we make one." He climbed into a dropship and shouted across the coms. "All remaining fighters, follow me. If we go down, we take that monster with us." The engines screamed to life, dust swirling into the air. The small ships, patched and ugly, lifted from the canyons like a swarm of sparks rising from fire. Behind them, the Nivorans watched in silence, their eyes reflecting the glow of the ships as they climbed toward the black clouds. Lyra stood on the ridge, gripping her rifle. "He's going up there, isn't he?" A soldier nodded. "That's what Deathworlders do." The humans flew through the storm, weaving between enemy fire. Their ships shook, panels tearing, but they did not stop. They fired missiles, cut through drones, and pushed straight toward the massive flagship. Inside, alarms blared as human ships began to ram its outer shields, explosions bursting like lightning across its hull. Rourke's voice came over the coms, calm but final. "Tell the Nivorans to hold their ground. If this works, they'll have it tomorrow." He steered his dropship directly toward the glowing cannon core. It pulsed like a heart ready to destroy a planet. As he neared, his sensors went wild. The radiation was enough to melt steel. "Captain, you won't make it out." His lieutenant shouted through static. Rourke's lips curved into a grim smile. Deathworlders never planned to. He switched off the coms, locked the course, and whispered under his breath, "For those who can't fight back." The dropship plunged into the weapon core. A blinding flash tore through the sky. For one long moment, the entire planet went silent. Then came the explosion. From the surface, the Nivorans saw the sky bloom with light, as if a second sun had been born. The flagship broke apart, its metal burning in the upper atmosphere. The rest of the enemy fleet began to scatter, losing control and crashing one after another. The people on the ground fell to their knees. The humans who remained stared upward, speechless. Captain Rourke was gone. But the world was alive. Lyra's voice broke the silence. "He did it," she whispered. "He saved us all." And for the first time in their history, the Nivorans raised their hands to the sky, not in fear, but in salute to the Deathworlders who came when no one else would. For hours after the explosion, the sky above Nivora glowed like dawn. Fire streaks fell from orbit, the last fragments of the enemy fleet burning as they fell through the clouds. The people could not look away. The battle had ended, but victory did not feel like celebration. It felt like silence, heavy and endless. When the light finally faded, the survivors began to move. The Nivrans climbed out from the bunkers and ruins. Their faces were covered in ash, their hands shaking, but their hearts were still beating. The enemy was gone. The world was scarred, but alive. Lyra walked through the shattered city with a group of human soldiers. Their armor was burned, their weapons nearly empty. She kept looking toward the sky, half expecting to see the return of Captain Rourke's ship. But only drifting smoke remained. One of the soldiers placed a hand on her shoulder. "He knew what he was doing," the man said quietly. "He bought us this chance." She swallowed hard and nodded, though her eyes filled with tears. "Then we can't waste it." The surviving humans and Nivrans worked side by side to rebuild. Fires were put out, wounded were carried to makeshift tents, and food was shared between hands that only days ago trembled with fear. The Deathworlders were fewer, now less than half of them had survived the battle, but their spirit burned brighter than ever. Days passed. Smoke cleared from the sky. And soon, other ships began to arrive, not enemies this time, but watchers. Distant empires that had ignored the Nivrans' calls for help were now curious. Their sensors had picked up the destruction of a fleet that had terrified whole sectors. They came cautiously, sending scouts to observe what force could have caused it. When they landed, they expected to find devastation. Instead, they found a city alive again and humans among the survivors. The first envoy, a tall insectoid diplomat, stood speechless before the sight of a human welding armor beside a Nivran child. You fought the Iron Swarm?" it asked. A human sergeant, his voice calm and dry, looked up from his work. "Fought them. Killed them. Buried them." The envoy's wings trembled. "But how?" "That swarm destroyed entire worlds. Even the great empires could not stop them." The sergeant gave a tired smile. "The empires fight to protect pride. We fought to protect people. That's the difference." Word spread fast. Across nearby systems, rumors turned into reports, and reports turned into legends. The humans, those dangerous, reckless Deathworlders, had answered a plea for help when no one else dared. And they had won. Soon, broadcasts across the galaxy spoke of Nivora. The story of the battle reached distant worlds. Some refused to believe it. Others trembled in fear. A few, quietly, began to hope. But among the survivors, hope was mixed with grief. Captain Rourke's name was whispered everywhere. To the humans, he was a commander. To the Nivrans, he had become something far greater. The old elders called him the fire that answered. Lyra took charge of the rebuilding effort. She led both species together, humans and Nivrans, organizing defenses, food, and repairs. She wore a piece of Rourke's insignia tied around her wrist, a small metal badge burnt around the edges. It was all she had left of him. One night, as the stars returned to their quiet glow, she sat alone at the top of the rebuilt tower overlooking the valley. A small radio rested beside her, its signal light faint. She turned the dial, trying to reach the human command network. "Earth Command, this is Nivora Base," she said softly. "Captain Rourke is gone. But his mission succeeded. The people are safe. The enemy is destroyed." Static answered. Then, a faint voice broke through. "Copy that, Nivora Base. We received your message. Reinforcements are en route. Hold position." She smiled faintly and looked at the sky. He'd have liked that. Down below, the camp buzzed with life again. Human engineers were building transmitters, and Nivran children followed them, carrying tools and parts. The two races moved as one, no longer strangers. As the days turned into weeks, something unexpected happened. Refugees from other destroyed worlds began to arrive, guided by the same message that had once gone unanswered. Help needed. Nivora still stands. When the new arrivals saw humans waiting to greet them, they wept. Some had thought Deathworlders were only myths. Now they were salvation. The Nivrans took them in. The humans trained them. And slowly, the ashes of Nivora became the foundation for something new, a place where those abandoned by the galaxy could stand together, but far away. In the black depths of space, the remnants of the Iron Swarm gathered again. The loss of their fleet had not gone unnoticed. A new leader had risen among them, one whose mind pulsed with fury. They had underestimated the Deathworlders once. They would not make that mistake again. Their ships began to move. Back on Nivora, Lyra stood with her new allies and watched the stars. Her heart was calm. She could feel Rourke's spirit in every rebuilt wall, every soldier's step, every child's laugh. The Deathworlders had taught her one truth that would never fade: hope only dies when you stop fighting. And the next time the darkness came, it would not find Nivora helpless. It would find a world of fighters. Months passed. The smoke had cleared, the fires had gone out, and the sound of battle had faded into memory. Yet on Nivora, the scars remained craters in the ground, blackened towers, broken ships now turned into monuments. But from those ruins, something extraordinary grew. Where once there had been fear, there was unity. Humans and Navrans worked side by side, rebuilding homes, teaching, and training. The humans had come as strangers, but they were now family. Every corner of the city echoed with both human laughter and alien songs. Lyra walked through the rebuilt plaza at sunrise. Children ran past her, some Nivran, some born from refugee families who had come from far worlds. They played beside a statue being carved in stone. It was of a human standing tall, helmet tucked under his arm, gaze fixed on the horizon. Beneath it, the inscription read, "To Captain Rourke and the Deathworlders, they came when no one else did." Lyra smiled softly. The statue wasn't just for Rourke, it was for all of them. The humans who had fought, the ones who had fallen, and the ones who had taught the galaxy what courage truly meant. The rebuilding of Nivora had drawn attention from across the stars. The same empires that once ignored their calls for help now sent ambassadors and ships, pretending to offer assistance. But this time, Nivora stood proud. It was no longer a weak world begging for rescue. It was a fortress, guarded by Deathworlders. When the Galactic Council sent a formal delegation to visit, they expected to find a world desperate for protection. Instead, they found an army of humans and aliens standing together, disciplined and strong. The lead ambassador, cloaked in gold and arrogance, sneered as he looked around the command hall. "You think you can defy the great powers? A handful of humans and farmers cannot protect an entire planet." Lyra met his gaze without fear. "No," she said calmly, "but we can protect each other. And that's something your empires forgot how to do." The ambassador's words faltered. Around the hall, the humans stood silently, their eyes sharp, their armor gleaming. Behind them, Nivrans in new uniforms stood proudly, students once now soldiers. The sight was enough to make even the most powerful rulers uneasy. In the following months, more worlds began to send messages to Nivora. Small colonies, forgotten outposts, enslaved moons, each begging for help. They had heard the same story when everyone turned away. The Deathworlders came. The new Nivran fleet, forged from wreckage and human engineering, was ready. Lyra stood on the deck of the rebuilt flagship, the Rourke's Resolve, as it rose into orbit. Around her, human and alien officers prepared for launch. The galaxy that had once abandoned them was about to witness something it had never seen before, an alliance built not on power or greed, but on loyalty and courage. "Set course for Verilia Prime," Lyra ordered. They called for help. "We answer." The engines ignited. The fleet cut through the clouds, leaving a trail of light behind. As they moved into the stars, transmissions began to flow, invoices from across systems. Some cheering, some weeping, some whispering in disbelief. The Deathworlders had not just saved one planet, they had inspired a movement among the stars. Word spread like fire. The Deathworlders answer the cries of the helpless. On the bridge, one of the human lieutenants smiled. Rourke would have been proud. Lyra looked out at the stars. He didn't die for pride. He died so the galaxy could remember what it means to care. The fleet jumped into hyperspace, their wake glowing like a comet trail. Somewhere beyond, the Iron Swarm stirred again, rebuilding, plotting revenge. But they would no longer face a single world begging for help. They would face thousands united by one legacy: humanity's refusal to turn away. Back on Nivora, the old elders stood beneath the statue of Rourke, surrounded by children listening to his words. His voice was calm but filled with pride. "There was a time when we cried for help, and the stars gave us silence," he said. "Then one day, the Deathworlders came. They taught us to fight, to build, to stand tall. They showed us that strength is not in armor or power, but in the heart that refuses to break." The children listened, wide-eyed. The elders smiled and looked toward the rising sun. "And when the darkness comes again, they will return. For that is what Deathworlders do." They answer. Above him, in the clear sky, a distant flash of light streaked across the heavens, a ship jumping into the unknown. The galaxy would never forget the day humans answered the call, and the legend of the Deathworlders had just begun.